Hello again to all my faithful listeners. Thanks so much for joining me. I am Charles Wells, and you have tuned in to another edition of The Patriot Preacher. Today, folks, we're going to talk a bit about how badly our brothers and sisters in blue are being treated. Honestly, I don't know why anyone would want to be a police officer in today's climate. I remember in the aftermath of 9/11, just 20 years ago, how we were celebrating all of our first responders. In fact, if you didn't like our brave police officers, people would get mad at you. How times have changed. Fast forward 20 years, and if you like police officers or support them in the execution of their duties, you're a horrible person. So what happened? Did the basic job of policing somehow change dramatically? Did these police officers somehow magically become more of a hateful and racist group of people than their predecessors? Or did our perception of this group just get twisted by an out-of-control press corps who can basically and routinely misrepresent pretty much anything that they please with complete impunity? My vote would be for the latter. So why did this happen? What could possibly be gained by routinely vilifying a group of people who run into situations which most of us would run away from? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't believe that all police officers do their jobs as they're supposed to do, no more than I believe any group of people do. And certainly when police officers get it wrong, need more training, or act contrarily to their code of ethics, then they need to pay the price commensurate with the transgression. But what we are seeing today is an intentional onslaught against the police that is neither constructive nor in keeping with a realistic view of these folks. I have personally worked with the Texas Department of Public Safety for 5 years. And during that time, I had the privilege of working with hundreds of these people on a daily basis. And I can assure you that the vast majority of them are family-oriented. They're rule-abiding people who try to do the best job they can. They are, in fact, ordinary people, sometimes placed in extraordinary circumstances that most of us will never have to experience. If we are to believe the narrative being promoted by the left in this country, then it would seem that our country's police officers are unceremoniously hunting down black people in this country as a part of an overall systemic racist problem. But narratives, folks, are not facts. Let's look at 2018, the most recent year in which complete data sets have been published. According to Heather McDonald, who wrote The Diversity Delusion, which illustrates how race and gender pandering corrupts the minds of our university students and undermines our culture, we are being fed a line of lies by the Main Street press. She is from the Manhattan Institute and is an acknowledged expert in this area. She uses mathematics to dispel the myth that black people in this country are being disproportionately shot by the police when compared to men and women of every other race. In 2018, African Americans made up 53% of all known homicides and 60% of all robberies, even though they only constitute 13% of the population. Yet, of the 996 fatal police shootings that occurred throughout the United States in 2018, only 209 or 21% involved black suspects, which is significantly less than what the black crime rate would suggest. Well, what about the perception that so many unarmed black people are just being shot by the police? Data from the Washington Post shows that 23 unarmed black suspects were killed in 2018, and only 12 were killed in 2019. This is out of approximately 50 million encounters between police officers and civilians. And of course, you got to keep in mind that just because someone is unarmed doesn't mean they're not dangerous. A study conducted by two criminal justice researchers, John Shane and Zoe Swinson, found that in 90% of the cases involving quote-unquote unarmed suspects, the police opened fire only because they felt they were facing an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to themselves or to a third person they were trying to protect. These findings were published in the 2018 textbook Unarmed and Dangerous: Patterns of Threats by Citizens During Deadly Force Encounters with the Police. This is the Crime and Society series, first edition, As reported in the next year by Lexipol, a company that provides consulting services to police agencies, 90% of the suspects that were unarmed had been attempting to disarm a police officer, drown an officer, throw an officer off a bridge or a rooftop, strangle an officer, gesturing as if armed with a real weapon, keeping hands concealed after ordered to not keep them concealed, and charging toward a police officer with the apparent intent to assault, according to Lexipol. Because of false narratives put forth by the press corps, a majority of Americans have been convinced that every black person shot by the police is a victim, even when the evidence clearly shows they're not. And while the case of someone like George Floyd, which kicked off nationwide riots, is clearly an instance of police brutality of which he was clearly a victim, it didn't warrant putting Mr. Floyd on a pedestal when he had in fact spent the entirety of his life victimizing other people. The truth is that white people are much more likely to get killed by the police, statistically speaking, than someone who is black, which in my mind is completely understandable because of the scrutiny that people get when someone who is black is involved. After all, when was the last time you saw a case of an unarmed white person getting killed by the police get any kind of significant news coverage? The answer is none, because it simply is not newsworthy or fit within the narrative. Finally, because of all this, we are in the middle of ludicrous efforts to defund police departments in many of the big cities. What a ridiculous concept, folks. As the rapper Tom MacDonald once stated in his song Fake Woke, the police are already underfunded. Order food and call the police, as he said, and see which reaches you first. These defund movements are in fact placing the most vulnerable people at even higher risk because the most dangerous neighborhoods in America will become even more wide open for criminal activity. These neighborhoods need more policing, not less. If anything, we should be defunding the idiots in Congress, not the police. They are, after all, infinitely more dangerous to the decline of our republic than either the police or certainly criminals. And then, of course, you have idiots like LeBron James and others in the entertainment industry who have pretty significant followings actively promoting violence against police officers by espousing their uninformed views. Look, people, when a police officer is in the wrong, whether because of a training issue or straight up are abusing their authority, they need to be taken care of. But they are a minority in their profession. And in most cases, in these large cities, the police unions, which are democratic institutions, by the way, are so strong that they don't allow police officers who begin to show indications of abuse of power to be punished. When the indicators of these behavior first starts to nip it in the bud before it develops into a situation like what was experienced with George Floyd. You know, had that happened, the George Floyd incident would never have occurred. The fact is that police officers are human beings, and if you push them hard enough, sometimes they're going to react in bad ways. I can't even begin to tell you how I would react to some of the ways I have seen police officers being talked to and treated. Sometimes their composure, quite frankly, amazes me. Instead of promoting division and violence, wouldn't it be refreshing if some of these professional athletes, who are of course living the high life in our major cities, sponsored some programs that mentored young black men without fathers, taught them respect for authority, brought police officers and young men together in their communities, like for scrimmage games and other positive activities? But of course that would take their time, that would take their money, and most of all it would take effort. I guess they would just rather take a knee. How lazy, how easy, and to risk a bad pun, what a cop-out. People, we need to come together. Let's pray for these young men in these neighborhoods who don't have fathers in their lives. Let's pray for the police officers of all colors who risk their lives to defend others and make their lives a little safer. And finally, let's pray for this country to be enlightened and to think for themselves. I will close for now. If you agree or even disagree with anything I have said, I would enjoy hearing from you in the comments. Please join me in these discussions about the direction our great country is going by hitting that little subscribe button down below. And until next time, goodbye and God bless.